Jesus Christ, this game is fun. I mean, culturally speaking, this should have been what Doom 2016 was. Granted, nostalgia always plays a role in these things, and I was more or less the exact target age for this game's narrative when it was launched for the first time in 2011. But I played through it again recently after Full Clip went on sale for like $3, then immediately upped the difficulty and played through again on Overkill mode. And I didn't record a second of it, because I knew if I wanted to make a video, I really wouldn't mind a third trip. And I think it'll help us better understand Bulletstorm's charms if we open with talking about game development studio People Can Fly. They debuted with the impressive Painkiller back in 2004, which was this sort of Serious Sam-esque power fantasy shooter with a world and writing that epitomizes the phrase tonally confused. It had these ridiculous set pieces and characters and combat, and this lady that leaves her fucking tits hanging out the whole game, but a story that is begging to be taken dreadfully seriously without doing the legwork necessary to really earn that. Rivaled only by possibly The Suffering, it is a strong contender for being the most 2004 piece of media to ever fucking exist. It's a pretty good time. Now from there, they'd link up with Epic Games and do supporting work for the Gears of War series. You might know them as the lead development team on the spin-off game Judgment, where I think their more unique talents kind of went unutilized. Again, they took charismatic and fun characters like Damon Baird and Coltrane, but built a narrative that refuses to let them shine, while also failing to capture that grittiness and genuine emotional impact of Gears 2 or 3. Not to mention, while base Gears combat is pretty fun, if a bit dated at this point, every way that they tried to spice up the gameplay loop just resulted in a more tedious experience. They went independent again after that and turned to the grindy looter shooter model with 2021's Outriders, and technical issues aside, it's a pretty competent first outing into that wilderness, with great build variety and a return to that power fantasy feel. But story-wise, it's another tonal car crash. Everything feels very forced and everyone is just a little bit extra, but they're not really hitting that grimdark stride they're going for. Maybe you've started to see some writing patterns. But anyway, you're not here to learn about Polish dudes fumbling in the red zone. You want to know about the time they got everything right. 2011's Bulletstorm was the result of the team sitting down and saying, hey, what if we made a video game and the entire purpose of it was just to be fun as shit? Remember when AAA games could just be fucking fun? Why are studios allergic to having fun? And everyone just sort of nodded to each other, finished their fucking pierogi, and got to work. This was back when Epic was still daddy, and the game was being published by Electronic Arts themselves. So this thing had a pretty massive marketing presence. There were ads everywhere, a very hyped up real demo, a weird Call of Duty spoof demo. The expectations for it were high, and while it's probably rather clear that I think the game delivers on its premise, it did not turn a profit. The game has its little cult following, and it's been remastered once and is just about done being rebuilt for VR. But I can't shake the feeling that this game has been consistently slept on by the broader gamer audience for well over a decade. So let's talk about it.
I used to think my life was a tragedy, but now I think it's a comedy.
I'll warn you all here, general spoilers are likely to follow. I really don't think you should give a shit, but if you do, I'll talk to you later. Alright, now that those fucking losers are gone, I can't go any further without quickly revisiting that spoof demo mentioned a minute ago, Duty Calls. The entire point of it was to make fun of the gameplay and the narratives of popular military shooters at the time, which was bold, considering that Call of Duty campaigns were pretty beloved and high quality in that era. Nowadays, this demo poses the popular opinion, though, so perhaps we can liken this to a fine wine. Many have been keen to point out, however, that Bulletstorm itself employs almost every writing cliche it criticizes in this demo. Killing poorly established characters in an attempt at emotional impact, a main villain that's cartoonishly evil for no clearly justifiable reason, and an entire premise so filled with logical shortcomings that the MCU writers almost look competent by comparison. People Can Fly were posturing as if they had something entirely new to offer, but really it's just a halfway self-aware celebration of macho military entertainment. Not smart enough to be satire, but not dumb enough to be painful. And I find it to be just kind of wonderful. Protagonist Grayson and cyborg sidekick Ishii play off of each other and highlight their highly strained relationship in some pretty amusing ways. The entire world around them is so fucking dumb, and they're products of it, so part of the script is reveling in that absurdity, but the other part is like you dropped regular people into an idiotic shitshow. Failing to establish a consistent tone, the thing that has been kneecapping People Can Fly for 2 decades, is one of the most oddly charming things about the game. These characters are like fun parodies who occasionally become self-aware in between their killing sprees. It's clearly not for everybody, and I'm certainly not saying that this is an objectively good way to write a story, but goddamn if it didn't turn out entertaining. But enough of the generalizing, let's get down to brass tacks. Bulletstorm takes place in the 26th century, where man has reached the stars, and the galaxy is run by the clearly fucking evil Confederation of Planets. Grayson and friends are government-sanctioned murderers working under General Sarrano, taking down reporters and political dissidents and the like. Except, somehow they just didn't fucking realize they were the bad guys until Ishii finds a file on a computer that tells them so, at which point they turn against the Confederacy and swear revenge against the big mean general. Flash forward a few years, they attempt to suicide bomb the general's warship, but accidentally survive and end up stranding the survivors of both ships on a resort planet gone wrong. And I'm just gonna get this out in front, I want more of this setting. This place has the dumbest lore I've ever heard in my entire life, while being portrayed with such totality and spectacle that I can't help but buy in. Is it a commentary on the complacency and wastefulness of the elite, or a complex allegory for humanity's cyclical rise and collapse? I do not know, and I sincerely hope not. What happened here is that a big company moved on to a highly volatile planet plagued by severe electricity storms and big fucked off monsters, and said, I have a highly radioactive way to solve these problems. One hiccup though, no one wanted to work in such an environment, so they imported life sentence prisoners to operate the resort's protective machinery. And, they mutinied not long after the resort opened. The planet's defenses went down, radiation got everywhere, and outside of the few who escaped, the region's entire surviving population was either mutated into a freak or forced into a new life as a raider cannibal to survive. General Sarrano was here to detonate a DNA bomb and wipe out all life so everyone could move back in and try again when Grayson stranded everybody. And this is like the ultimate video game story. Every facet of this world was built with the intent of justifying ridiculous violence against a wide array of goobers. But again, there's real lore and rationale for all of it, and I was always strangely eager to learn more. Now, getting to Sarrano and keeping him alive is the only way off the planet for our heroes, and while it's clear that Grayson is kind of a miserable drunk that would rather kill the general and doesn't care if he himself dies, he does feel it's his responsibility to get Ishii to safety after causing this mess in the first place. So there's this constant internal struggle between a desire for blood and wanting to do right by his friend. And I mean, this is about the most surface level conflict we can give a character to make them remotely empathetic, but it does elevate the protagonist slightly beyond the absurdity around him. The boys meet up with one of Sarrano's goons en route to save him, and while she's probably the weakest of the characters personality-wise, she does add to the aggressive and humorous banter that I think is the better part of the game's minute-to-minute writing. She's mad at both boys, while Ishii's human side is mad at Grayson, Ishii's robot side is downright hostile towards all life, and Grayson is distrustful of the girl and a little annoyed with Ishii, but again still feels responsibility and love towards him. And every character is highly vocal about these stances. The part of the writing that I think is a lot weaker are the more drawn-out jokes that are mostly given to Grayson. You know, the "you're gonna kill my dick" bit, the mourning the dinosaur robot thing, those sorts of jokes where the game is at a halt and they really want you to focus in and get a laugh. They don't really do it for me. They're just these sort of crude products of their time, keeping in mind that this game first started being written in 2007, but there's no real wit to any of them. It comes across as very forced, and just to be frank, clearly not written by comedians, which is in sharp contrast to the character banter that often sounds surprisingly natural. Like I've said, I love how unapologetically dumb Bulletstorm is, but those are the moments where it's at its absolute dumbest, and it's overboard even for me. Now, the final important character is General Sarrano, and I think he's kinda great. He's like a hyper-militant, casually racist Gilbert Gottfried who berates everyone, laughs at piles of corpses, and is generally the kind of unnuanced evil that we can all get behind killing. So the segments of the game where the gang is forced to work with him instead is pretty entertaining. And it's also almost exclusively through the disorder and short-sightedness of the heroes that Sarrano is able to arm the DNA bomb and get away, rather than as a result of any real cunning or ability on his end. Which helps to make sure that he, from top to bottom, is portrayed as just the absolute fucking worst type of guy. It's a shame that this game's sales were so mid, because they sequel bait us very hard, teasing a second adventure and set of circumstances that I doubt we'll ever see. Anyway, I think we've spent enough time covering the part no one cares about, so let's move on to...
I see your dick one more time, I'm gonna fucking shoot it off! You don't have enough bullets, bitch!
So you've been looking at it for a while now. I'm assuming you've got an idea of the general flow of Bulletstorm combat. To this day, it is one of the most satisfying power fantasy shooters I've played, and while the last 7 to 8 years has seen this huge resurgence of fast-paced Doom-inspired shooters, many of which are of exceptionally high quality, I think Bulletstorm holds its own to this day and feels rather unique, because it's not really very Doom-esque at all. Now, I'm not very good at shooters, so a skilled player's gameplay is going to look a bit more fluid than mine, but even at its most perfected, Bulletstorm's base player movement is actually quite stiff compared to most boomer shooters. It's probably worth noting that the initial concept for the game was a Gears of War style cover shooter, just with crazier weapons, and while it evolved well beyond that and became something a lot more exciting and confrontational, that generally, heavy feeling wasn't entirely scrapped. Now, you can still slide all over the goddamn place at Mach 6, so you're not necessarily slow, but that's more a conscious tactical decision than the baseline expectation. What Bulletstorm does instead is bring enemies to you with the leash, which is an invention that I can't believe hasn't been stolen by dozens of shooters since. I don't think it really warrants over-explaining. It's a rather simple tool. You can snag enemies and objects from anywhere relatively close, including those in cover, and ragdoll them towards you, at which point they'll go into slow motion and you can inflict your sick gamer fantasies on them. This, combined with Grayson's rather powerful kick, gives you absolute control over spacing in combat, and rather intuitively keeps the player constantly thinking about the various environmental factors in every combat arena. Just instinctively rather early on, every time I entered a new area, I was making note of the environmental hazards to take advantage of, whether it was giant cacti, exposed wiring, cliffs, man-eating plants, literal fucking lava, whatever the case, and then identifying where enemies were likely to come from. On the more casual difficulties, whipping, kicking, and shotgunning goobers into 1 of 1,000 OSHA violations is really just a source of fun, but on tougher settings, it is very easy to find yourself overwhelmed, and smart environmental play is one of your most efficient options for evening the playing field. And there's a great little mix of enemy styles. Once the ball gets rolling, it's not uncommon to be staring down melee, mid-range, explosive, and sniper enemies all at once. Now, your killing power is obviously absurdly high, so you're not ever going to find yourself without options, but it isn't a game that rewards passiveness. Enter the skill shot system. That's the name for all the bright words and numbers that are constantly popping up on screen, giving daddy his dopamine fix. Another pretty straightforward mechanic, the skill shot system is where the player earns the currency they need to purchase ammo, weapon upgrades, new weapons, and charges for the crazy alternate firing modes. If you're in a pinch and just need to sling bullets at center mass to bring a fella down, that's perfectly fine, but it results in a rather paltry payout. If instead you get a sick headshot, throat shot, ball shot, slide kick into a shotgun blast, kick an explosive ball into a crowd, or any of the 131 available skill shots, your payout for the kill will be much higher and your reward is more or better firepower in the very near future. Now, at any given time, a player can go into their menu and read the skill shots associated with a given weapon to see what they still need to try to pull off. And I did this a good bit to unlock them all in my Overkill playthrough, but most players are probably going to find the majority of them organically just due to how effective the game is at encouraging creativity through the environment and different enemy resistances that need to be worked around. Now to look at the weapon roster, it is one of my all-time favorite spreads. I kind of respect your intelligence, and I'm rolling with the assumption that your fucking eyeballs work and have been glancing at the screen now and then, so I won't waste your time with a detailed rundown, but I'll give you a taste of the primary arsenal. Your starting weapon is the assault rifle. It works as intended. Not the most exciting piece of the armory, but it is an absolute workhorse that will get the job done. Alternate firing mode is a basic explosion that one-shots mobs. Next, you'll get the revolver. Good damage, punchy feeling, and generally a one-shot kill to the head or other weak points. Alternate firing mode is a mini rocket that carries homeboy off and is likely to cause collateral damage. Next, we have the shotgun, which follows the fundamental rules for video game shotguns, but ends up feeling like a pretty unique take on the weapon. Damage drop-off due to distance from the target happens almost immediately. If you want to blow a guy apart, you basically need to be close enough to kiss. But there's a considerable range at which the shotgun won't always kill an opponent, but will send them flying backwards, making it the go-to weapon if you need some room to breathe or want to fling guys into environmental hazards with more style. Alternate firing mode is a shockwave that can vaporize several enemies at once. Then there's the sniper, which predictably does major damage and switches you into slow motion as you personally guide every bullet that comes out of it. Alternate firing mode has two effects. The first is that the bullet has a fucking bomb built into it that you can detonate at will, and the second is that you're able to control the bullet even after it's entered an enemy and ragdoll them around into other bad guys or whatever else you may want to blow up. Now the flail gun, the bouncer, and the penetrator are great weapons too, a little more situational, but incredibly powerful when wielded with finesse, and I think it'll be more rewarding if I let you discover their utility for yourselves. Now before closing, I better mention the content you get outside of the initial campaign. You've probably heard me bring up Overkill mode a couple times now. This is just New Game Plus, where you carry over all weapon upgrades and play through again. But in this mode, once you complete every skill shot for a given weapon, you unlock unlimited ammo for it, and that includes for the overpowered alternate firing modes. Really cranking your difficulty here if you play on anything under the max, and just seeing how destructive shit can get, makes the second playthrough every bit as exciting as the first, for me at least. Outside of that, you've got Echoes, which are just a sort of arcadified replaying of different campaign levels, where you try to get the highest score possible by pulling off skill shots. Anarchy mode is the multiplayer bit, and I don't have friends to play this with, so I really have no fucking clue whether it's cool, but I've heard it was neat back in the day. If someone in the comments is able to confirm or deny, go for it. There's also a mildly infamous $5 DLC for this game that replaces Grayson's character model and voice lines with Duke Nukem's. And I do think it's occasionally amusing to hear Duke chime in on events he doesn't really understand, but ultimately it's not much more than a quick asset flip to cash in on nostalgia. Now, I don't know your financial situation, but I know Bulletstorm goes on pretty steep sales somewhat regularly, so unless you're homeless and you're checking this video out on the public library's computer, I'm pretty sure Bulletstorm will be worth your $3 the next time it goes on sale. Just like I talked about earlier, and just like you can read in the title of this video, Bulletstorm embodies what it is to exist solely for the sake of being as exciting and entertaining as possible, and does so without falling into the countless traps that everything from spoof movies to the Borderlands sequels do, or at least while being able to recover when it does fall. I'm not going to give it a score out of 10, because if I wanted to do that, I would have just done that, instead of rambling about a 13-year-old game for this long. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to let me know. I'll talk to you guys later.